From industrial hemp legalization to ongoing efforts to beef up the cattle industry in Kentucky, our guest on today's Kentucky Outlook is known for his advocacy for the farmers of the Commonwealth. He's also considered the strongest contender for the Republican ticket for governor in 2015. Coming up, we're going to have a conversation with Kentucky's Agriculture Commissioner, James Comer. And later in the program, we're going to be joined by the chairman of the Kentucky Hemp Commission, Furnish, to learn more about efforts to legalize hemp in the state. More on Kentucky Outlook next. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Kentucky Outlook. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're going to be talking with our Kentucky Agriculture Commissioner, James Comer. He's known as a true advocate for the Kentucky farmer. He's a farmer himself. He served in the State House of Representatives for over a decade, and he was sworn in as Kentucky's Agriculture Commissioner in January of 2012. He's got a lot on his plate. In fact, there's something called the 2015 gubernatorial race that a lot of people are pointing to him as the leading contender. We're going to talk about that as we welcome James Comer. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be back on campus.
Yes, you're an alum of WKU.
Graduated in 1993.
In agriculture.
I'm a proud hilltopper.
There, as it should be. And can I get something right off the table right now? Jamie, a lot of people refer to you as Jamie Comer. That's
my nickname growing up. I tried to change it when I became a state representative, and it always stuck with me. I tried to go from Jamie to James, so I've accepted Jamie.
Okay, so if we call you Jamie accidentally, you're gonna go with
right.
that. You do have a lot on your plate, and I want to talk about what's going on with hemp and some of the things affecting farmers in the state of Kentucky. But let's talk a little bit about the Republican Party in the state of Kentucky. You know, you came in, you're seeing what's happening, you're looking at, a lot of people are pointing to you for 2015 to run for governor. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, it's obviously something we're looking at. It's a big step to go from a constitutional office to a gubernatorial campaign, and I realize that. But the thoughts of being able to take statewide the reforms that we've enacted at the Department of Agriculture is very exciting. We've made the Department of Agriculture transparent, it's efficient, all the employees are accountable, and we brought in a good management team. That's what we need in Frankfort. So the ability to be able to do that on a statewide basis is very exciting to me.
You have been lauded for your efforts at bipartisanship. I mean, it seems like you can just go right in there, get both parties to work together. Are you a middle child or something?
No.
Those negotiating skills, but that would certainly be an asset in the governor's mansion.
And that's what we need. People want that. It doesn't matter if they're a registered Republican, Democrat, or independent. They are sick and tired of partisan fighting. They don't want people to go up and their sole focus be in the legislature fighting and trying to make the other side look bad. They want people to come together on issues where there is agreement and have consensus and move Kentucky forward and move our nation forward. And that's what we've tried to do. Every major initiative we've had, we've tried to do it with a prominent Democrat. When I went to Washington recently, I took Jonathan Miller, who's a former chairman of the state Democrat Party, former state treasurer. We've passed legislation with Senator Robin Webb from Carter County in eastern Kentucky. We've worked with Governor Beshear on some of his initiatives. I've called for the audit when I first took office with the Democrat auditor. So we're fixing to do something with the state treasurer, Todd Hollenbach. So we're always looking to try to do something with a prominent Democrat. And when we worked with the industrial hemp legislation, Congressman Yarmouth was a big player in that, and he testified beside me in Frankfort when we presented the bill, and was very instrumental in gaining support in Washington.
We're going to talk more about that as the half hour progresses. So I'm getting a sense from you, because this is an opportunity for people to get to know you, Jamie Comer. You have a philosophy in the way in which you do things. Share that with us. What is that?
There are differences between Republicans and Democrats, obviously, but there are issues where we agree on. We need to focus on the issues where there is an agreement and try to come to a consensus to be able to accomplish things. The reality about Kentucky is we're not growing at the same rate of our surrounding states. If you look at Indiana, Ohio, and Tennessee, they've elected bold leadership. They've gone into the state, they have passed major tax reform with the focus being on making their state competitive and and have the ability to attract good paying jobs to their state. We haven't done that in Kentucky. So you look at Kentucky, the House where I served for 6 terms is Democrat, the Senate is Republican. One thing we all agree on is we need to create more jobs in the state. This is what we need to focus on instead of having divisive social issues and things where Democrats aren't going to agree with Republicans and where Republicans aren't going to agree with Democrats. Let's focus on the economy and creating jobs and try to pass legislation which will make our state competitive again. That's kind of my philosophy. Take issues where we can gain support from Democrats because it's still a predominantly Democrat state, and try to get things done for the betterment of Kentucky.
Yeah, but there aren't always those issues that we can agree on. But we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about your efforts at going to Washington, D.C. and working on behalf of hemp and some of the other issues facing our Kentucky farmers. We're going to be right back with Kentucky Outlook when our conversation with James Comer, Kentucky Agriculture Commissioner, continues. Stay with us. Kentucky Outlook continues. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're having a conversation today with Kentucky's Agriculture Commissioner James Comer, or Jamie Comer as he's known. And you're an alum of Western. And before the break, we got you right out of the gate talking about the 2015 Republican gubernatorial nod, where a lot of people are looking at you as the heir apparent, that you're going to be the guy. So you shared with us your philosophy about and you're lauded for that, your ability to get both parties to come to the table on issues that affect us all. Sometimes there are issues that are very personal to one party or the other. You don't always have that leverage.
No, we don't. And right now, our #1 priority as a state should be to grow our economy and rein in state spending. What we've done at the Department of Agriculture, we've gone down line by line in our state budget. We have privatized certain services. We've cut divisions out where we didn't need to have. And we've also increased the number of employees in certain divisions where we weren't performing our regulatory responsibilities at an adequate rate. So I think that's what we need in state government. If you look at the personnel is the biggest expense in any state budget, regardless whether it's the university level or the transportation cabinet or whatever. So we've looked and we've been able to go in there and eliminate a lot of unnecessary personnel. We have terminated or had let go or resigned, whatever you want to call it, about 1/5 of the Department of Agriculture in a year and a half. That's amazing. That's never happened before. But we've done it the right way. We didn't try to fire Democrats and hire Republicans back like we've seen in the past. We did it the right way. We looked for the most qualified people, people that have a passion for agriculture, people that have a work ethic, and that's what we need in state government. Most state employees are great, but there are some that aren't performing. And we need to go through there, and that's how we're going to be able to shrink the size of government and get government spending under control. It's unfair to the students at Western. It's unfair to the students in the public schools in Warren County and Monroe County, where I'm from, where we keep cutting education, and the people that get cut are the classroom teachers that don't have tenure, even if they're good, or class books or supplies or things like that. We want to come in and look at it like a business and be efficient, and I think that's where we're going to be able to make a difference in Kentucky.
You sound like a candidate.
Well, we're not a candidate. I love being ag commissioner.
But you do, and the passion, you can feel that passion. So let's talk about the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
Let's talk about agriculture in Kentucky. A lot of people watching this program know that firsthand. They're out there, they're trying to make a living. Right. And so what are you doing for Kentucky farmers? Well,
we've done a lot. We've taken the Kentucky Proud program, which is the marketing initiative for Kentucky agriculture, and I think we've taken it to the next level. You look at a couple of initiatives that we've rolled out in the department. They're becoming national models. First was our Kentucky Proud Homegrown by Heroes initiative. If you see the Kentucky Proud logo on a product, you know that means that product was produced or manufactured in Kentucky by a Kentucky farm family or a Kentucky small business. Now if you see it with a military veteran saluting a flag, that means that's produced or manufactured by a Kentucky veteran farmer or Kentucky veteran small business owner. That's been very successful. We have companies call every day wanting to do business exclusively with Homegrown by Heroes farmers in Kentucky. Next initiative was our Utterly Kentucky Milk Project, which is heading towards Bowling Green. We're in central Kentucky and southeastern Kentucky now. We'll be at Walmart in Bowling Green very soon. It's a 100% Kentucky produced and Kentucky processed milk product. It sells at a premium because people want to know where their food comes from. They want to support their local economies, and this product is doing that. We're going to launch several more initiatives with Walmart. We're fixing to launch some with Target, Costco, where we're taking Kentucky farm products, getting them on the shelves in the major retail outlets and also the major restaurant chains around the state.
Well, now that's one way to get to the people, but you also have to educate them.
Right.
You know, about this is where it comes from, this is why it's important. So that effort, I guess, is.
It is, and I speak to a lot of Rotary groups, chamber groups around the state to talk about agriculture, and I want to increase agriculture literacy around the state. People are at least 3 generations removed from the farm now. They don't know where their food comes from. Young people that go through McDonald's and order chicken McNuggets, they don't know where chicken McNuggets come from. And poultry is the largest agricultural crop in the state. So we're trying to really beef up our presence with non-ag groups so that we can increase ag literacy, make people aware of the economic significance that agriculture has in our state. We sold $5 billion worth of farm products in Kentucky last year.
Say that again.
$5 billion worth of Kentucky farm products last year. We should double that. We should have more food processors in the state. We should have more companies that manufacture Kentucky farm products in the state. And I think if you look at rural economic development around the state, we can revitalize and enhance a lot of our rural communities if we refocus our rural economic development efforts around agriculture. And that's what we're preaching when we go into a community and talk to a chamber group or an economic development group.
Now, we're going to talk about the hemp legislation, the legalization, bringing it back to Kentucky, because we have Brian Furnish is going to be joining us in just a little while in this half hour. But let's talk, and Brian, when we were waiting in the lobby there, was reminding us that Kentucky is still the #1 burley tobacco grower in the country.
That's right. It's significant. Tobacco consumption is going down in the United States, but it's increasing about 3% worldwide. So most of the burley tobacco that you see in the area, in your viewing area, is exported. And that's significant. Anytime you can produce something in the United States and export it to another country and get that other country's money, that's a good thing, because so much of what we purchase as consumers comes from China and other countries. So
who's the biggest exporter of our tobacco?
I think if you look, China is a player now. Brian Furnish can answer that question better than I can, but we've recently opened up new markets with countries like Egypt and a lot of third world countries in Central America that we never would have dreamed would be buying Kentucky tobacco.
Interesting. We're going to talk more with our Kentucky Agriculture Commissioner, James Comer, when we're joined by Brian Furnish, who's now the chairman of the Kentucky Hemp Commission. We're going to talk about hemp on Kentucky Outlook. Stay with us. Kentucky Outlook continues. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're talking today with our Agriculture Commissioner for the state of Kentucky, and also the chairman of the Kentucky Hemp Commission is joining us now. Brian Furnish joins us, and Brian is also with International Tobacco Trading Group. He runs that. He's a Harrison County farmer. Thanks for joining the conversation.
I'm glad to be here.
And I wanted to bring the two of you together. First of all, we're excited to have James Comer here as the Agriculture Commissioner, but also part of, you know, when your name comes up anymore, a lot of people say hemp. Okay, because you've pushed very hard for the legalization. And this is a crop that flourished in Kentucky until the federal government banned it several decades ago. And at that point, it was classified as a controlled substance. So suddenly, it got this bad stigma attached to it. But what you're saying is, for years, for centuries, Kentucky was known as a hemp growing area. So let's talk about this thing called the Hemp Commission. You brought something to my attention that I wasn't aware of. It was begun in the early 2000s, in the early
my first year in the General Assembly, legislation passed which would set up the Industrial Hemp Commission. There was an effort back then led by people like Brereton Jones and former Governor Louis Nunn, former Majority Leader Joe Barrows. They were trying to get legislation passed which would allow for a new crop in Kentucky, one that was native to Kentucky, like hemp. At that time, we were seeing other countries were starting to manufacture industrial hemp. Unfortunately, it got started and then it just kind of died and lay dormant for over a decade. And then when I became Ag Commissioner, we started it up again.
But started it up because you came in as Ag Commissioner and said, you know what, Brian, we got something here we need to work on.
We do, and I'll let Brian comment on it, but I want to make sure all the viewers are aware that hemp is a different plant than marijuana. I'm opposed to marijuana, but hemp is in the same plant family as marijuana. It's kind of like broccoli and cauliflower. They're in the same plant family, but they're different plants, and they look different, and they taste different. That's with industrial hemp. hemp is a product that we're finding more and more uses for every day. If you look at rural economic development, for example, and how can we bring manufacturing jobs back to Kentucky, I think this crop is going to be a bigger player every year in manufacturing, because we're manufacturing things out of hemp that we're currently making from plastic and trees. So if you're into sustainability and being eco-friendly, then hemp is the way to go. So we've pushed this, and I appreciate Brian Furnish and his leadership on this issue.
Absolutely, and I want to explore this a little bit more, because in the past we've done shows on hemp. We've had an agriculture person here to talk about the history of hemp, and then of course we have the law officials, law enforcement officials, who maybe are not fully aware of the ramifications, but they are not in favor of this. You know, there were a lot of them that spoke up that they didn't want this. So let's backtrack. So you get into the Ag Commissioner's office, you decide that hemp, we need to re-explore this, re-establish the commission, get it going, get Brian on board there. But what is it you're pushing for? You know, the legalization of hemp, or just the ability to grow it? Help our audience understand.
The ability to grow hemp. The United States is the only industrialized nation in the world that does not allow for the cultivation of hemp, which is crazy. You buy things in the grocery store every day, you buy things at Bed Bath & Beyond, the GNC store every day, made from hemp grown in other countries. I think, you know, if you look at Kentucky, we're a huge automotive state. We're the third biggest automotive producing state in the nation. We have a lot of supplier factories around the state that make interior parts for the automobile. In Germany, Mercedes and BMW are making hemp, are making the dash and the door panels and all the interior parts of those vehicles from hemp fibers. We still make them from plastic in the United States. So in the future, automobile makers are going to be more green and more sustainable. Hemp production could be a major crop in the state, and it could lead to more manufacturing jobs.
So basically, you're wanting to get us on the map, ready to roll, if the federal, because now Brian, help us understand this, because you've done a lot in Washington, D.C. on behalf of this effort as well, but chime in here. The feds have to approve it first.
Yeah, basically, we got Senate Bill 50 passed here in the state of Kentucky in the last legislative session, led by Commissioner Comer and Senator Paul Hornback and others. And so that passed basically stating that if the federal government legalized the production of industrial hemp, then Kentucky would have a law in place and a framework in place to license farmers so that we would have the ability to start growing industrial hemp. So then the focus changed to Washington, and Commissioner Comer took a trip to Washington, had some very productive meetings there with Speaker of the House Boehner, with many people from the administration. And so now the movement has to take place in Washington. There has to be some kind of movement, and we've had some recent success. Representative Tom Massey from my part of the state of Kentucky got an amendment to the Farm Bill in the House, and it passed out of the House attached to the Farm Bill, and now it's sitting and waiting for a conference between the Senate and the House. The bill's not exactly what we wanted, but it's a step in the right direction, because it's the first time that a full body of Congress has voted to legalize hemp. Basically, it states that the universities in states that already have current law, so that includes
that would be Kentucky, yeah. And how many others are there?
11, 13.
13?
Yeah.
Okay.
So those states would have the ability for those universities to start doing research. My goal as a farmer is that we want the ability that the farmer can start doing some research as well, because the universities are great. They can help do the research as we move forward, but a farmer will figure out a lot of things very quickly, whether it's a good or not.
And you're grinning because you've been...
He's a farmer too. And
yeah, he's a farmer too, but you've also been quoted sometimes as saying, you know, you need to go to the farmer instead of the researchers sometimes, because they're in the trenches.
Well, basically as a farmer, what we're asking for is the ability to raise a crop and let the free market determine the viability of it. We know it can grow here. It flourished here before. We know that there's a demand for it. A study that just came out said that there's over $500 million of retail sales of hemp products in the United States.
500 million?
Yes, and so all that's imported. None of that's grown here. I can import any hemp product I want to and make anything out of it I want to. I just can't grow it here.
You just can't grow it.
Right.
Now, if indeed, so Senate Bill 50 set the ground rules. Okay, we're ready in the event that the federal government says proceed. How long would it be before we could actually see some movement in that regard in the state of Kentucky if the federal law passed?
Immediately, if the federal government passed it, we would begin the process with the Hemp Commission and the Department of Agriculture of setting up the licensing program. Farmers would have to be licensed, they'd have to do a background check, they'd have to give GPS coordinates of their fields. These are all things to ensure the law enforcement that we're not trying to hide marijuana, that if you want to see our patch of hemp, here's the GPS coordinates, here's the licensed farmer, he's passed a criminal background check. All these things are in place to make sure that a scrupulous person is not out trying to grow marijuana. And anybody that knows the crop understands that marijuana growers do not want hemp in their area because...
I was just going to ask that. It affects the marijuana crop, apparently.
Hemp, through cross-pollination, would kill the potency of the marijuana. So the marijuana growers would not want it in their area. And so it doesn't make logical sense to think that they would plant marijuana in a hemp field, because if they did, it would end up having the same THC level as hemp, which would be nothing.
Non-existent.
Right.
Non-existent. So my contention is, and it's always been, a lot of people just don't understand or have a lot of misinformation about this. So you're seeing it more as a real means for Kentucky to get in the ballpark and really make it a cash crop like it once was.
Absolutely, and it's never going to replace tobacco, but it's another tool in the toolbox for the farmers. Brian is a tobacco farmer. He has cattle, but every farming operations, like most small businesses, the more diversified you are, the more successful you'll be. So I think this is an alternative crop for the state. When you look at the $500 million in sales last year, if we had more industrial hemp, the sales would be greater. And if it ever gets into the automotive industry in the United States, like it is in Europe, the sky's the limit. But for example, Dr. Oz, who has the cooking show, cooks with hemp oil. And he was saying on his show the other day, he can't hardly get hemp oil anymore to cook his vegetables. Instead of vegetable oil, he uses hemp oil. And that's another use for hemp. It's big in the food industry. It's big in the protein supplement industry. It's big in the cosmetics and lotion industry, in addition to the fibers where you can make fabric, you can make parts for the automotive industry, you can make paper. So it's a very up and coming crop, and I want to get in on the ground floor in Kentucky. No farmer will grow hemp if there's not a market to sell it. The only way there's going to be a market to sell it is if we're able to recruit the processors into this state, and that's what we've been working on at the Department of Agriculture.
Let's talk about the processors in this state, because the history of hemp is it's a very strong fiber type thing, right? So it was used in a lot of ropes, in a lot of fabrics, and still is to this day. But when you talk about processors, you're talking about people who can make this hemp oil?
Go ahead.
There's two different products you're looking at when you have hemp. You have the seed, and you have a tremendous number of products that can come from the seed. And he mentioned Dr. Oz, and
now we know. Huh?
I'm studying a lot that hemp seed for food is considered a superfood in the world because it has no cholesterol, it's high in protein, it has omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, and it's a complete meal if people want to use it, but nobody knows about it. And when I went to look for the product to try to buy it, you either had to buy it online from somewhere in Canada, or you can get it at Whole Foods or Wild Oats. So it's not really a mainstream product that hardly anybody knows about. We went through this whole debate and nobody talked about eating hemp seed. Well, now I know people because of it that eat hemp seed every day, and it's really good for your health.
From a health product.
Yeah.
And it can be used in dog foods and things like that as well?
It can be used for anything. And if you look at the history of mankind in China, when they had periods of starvation, that's how they kept their people alive, was through hemp seed. And so people all over the world know a lot about it, but for so many years it was stigmatized as a bad thing because it was the people promoting it were also people promoting marijuana, and that's something we've stayed away from. We were opposed.
Separate and distinct.
This is a very separate crop. Hemp is a viable, alternative, renewable crop that we're looking to, as Commissioner Comer said, be the first in the United States. And the rest of the world's looking at us to see, because we used to be the seed supplier for most of the world.
And talk about that, because that's what it would come down to, is the seed. So, you know, we could supply those seeds once again.
Right, and we have a company that's domiciled in Kentucky called L Seed, and there are other companies that want to be in the certified seed business. So we have lots of interest from companies not just out of state and outside the country, but in Kentucky as well, that want to process hemp either for the fiber or for the seeds and for the various uses. So I think it has a lot of potential. People say, well, how many jobs will it create? I can't answer that, because as Brian said, there's so many uses for the crop that other countries know about that we don't know about in the United States. But I look ahead to the future and I see, especially people on this campus, they want to be sustainable, they want to be eco-friendly. This is a crop that achieves that. They want to eat healthy. This is a crop from a nutritional standpoint that does that as well. So I think looking ahead,